Warning, some histories shouldn't be told, but this one will be.
My name is Mikhail Petrov. I am the 10th member of the Dyatlov expedition, the one not listed in the official records, the one the Soviet government buried, along with the truth about my friends. And this is what really happened on that mountain in February 1959. We were students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, 9 bright souls full of life and ambition, led by Igor Dyatlov, an experienced mountaineer who had conquered peaks that would make grown men weep. I was the 10th. The expedition was supposed to be a Category 3 trek, the most difficult classification in Soviet mountaineering. We would cross the northern Urals in winter, reaching Mount Otorten, and returning with glory, experience, and stories to tell our grandchildren. I remember the morning we left Sverdlovsk on January 23rd. The air was crisp, our spirits high. Lyudmila Dubinina was singing folk songs, her voice cutting through the cold morning air like a warm blade. Rustem Slobodin was making jokes about how we'd all freeze our asses off and still brag about it for years. Zina Kolmogorova was checking and rechecking her pack with that meticulous precision she brought to everything. We were young. We were invincible. We were fools. The train took us to Ivdel, then a truck to Vizhai, the last inhabited settlement. The locals there, I remember their faces when Igor told them our route. An old Mansi woman, her face like weathered leather, grabbed my arm as we prepared to leave. "Kholat Syakhl," she whispered, her breath reeking of tobacco and fear. "Dead mountain. Don't go. The mountain does not forgive. It does not forget." I laughed it off. We all did. Superstition, we thought. The fears of simple people who didn't understand the triumph of Soviet science and human determination. God, how wrong we were. The first days of the trek were exactly as we expected. Brutal, exhausting, exhilarating. The snow was deep, sometimes waist deep, and the cold was the kind that finds every gap in your clothing, every weakness in your resolve. Temperatures dropped to -25, -30 degrees Celsius. The wind was a living thing, a beast that howled and clawed at us constantly. On January 28th, Yuri Yudin had to turn back. He was suffering from sciatica, couldn't continue. I remember him hugging each of us goodbye, tears freezing on his cheeks. He was the lucky one, the one who lived to grow old, to have children, to die in his bed. We pushed forward, 9 of us now, plus me making 10, though officially I was never there. The Soviet Union had its reasons for erasing my existence from the records. Reasons I understand now, even if I'll never forgive them. By February 1st, we had reached the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. The wind was ferocious, visibility near zero. Igor made the decision to set up camp on the slope rather than descend to the forest below. A tactical error, perhaps, but understandable given the conditions. We pitched the tent around 5 p.m. It was a large communal tent that could fit all of us, though cramped. We cut blocks of snow to anchor it, built a small stove from the parts we'd been carrying. Inside, pressed together like sardines, we ate cold food, told jokes, sang quietly. I was on the edge, near the tent wall. Zina was to my right, writing in her diary by flashlight. Rustem was mending a tear in his jacket. Lyudmila was already asleep, snoring softly. It felt safe. It felt like we had conquered the mountain, that we would wake up tomorrow, reach Otorten, and claim our victory. Around 11 p.m. we began settling in for sleep. The wind outside was a constant roar, but we were used to it by now. The tent fabric flapped and snapped, but it held. Then I heard it. At first I thought it was the wind. a low, resonant sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. A frequency that made my teeth ache, my bones vibrate. But it wasn't the wind. It was breathing. Massive, rhythmic breathing, like a locomotive drawing air. But no machine sounds like that. No animal I'd ever heard sounded like that. I sat up. Others were stirring too. "You hear that?" Georgy Krivonoshenko whispered, his voice tight. We all heard it. The breathing grew louder, closer. And then came the steps.
Not the crunch of regular footsteps in snow.
These were impacts. Each one made the ground tremble slightly. Heavy, deliberate. Something massive was approaching our tent. "Bear," someone whispered. Bear? But it wasn't a bear. Bears don't walk with that kind of weight. Bears don't breathe with that kind of resonance. And bears don't make the sound that came next. The roar. God in heaven, the roar. It started low, a rumble that I felt in my chest before I heard it with my ears. Then it built, rising in pitch and volume until it was a scream, a howl, a sound that bypassed my ears entirely and went straight into my primal brain, the part that remembers when humans were prey. Every hair on my body stood up. My bladder loosened. I wasn't the only one. "What is this? What is that?" Zena's voice was high, panicked. The tent wall behind me bulged inward. Something had pressed against it from outside. I could see the impression. Massive, vaguely hand-shaped, but wrong. Too large, fingers too long. And then another roar, this time from a different direction. There was more than one. What happened next is a blur of terror and chaos. No order, no leadership, no Soviet discipline. Just pure animal panic. Someone, I think it was Igor, screamed, "Get out! Get out now!" But the entrance was on the far side of the tent, and whatever was outside was moving around us, circling, those massive footsteps shaking the ground. Rustem grabbed a knife. In one desperate motion, he plunged it into the tent wall and dragged it down, creating a long slash in the canvas. Then another, then another. We tore through those cuts like animals escaping a trap. No time to grab coats, no time to grab boots, no time for anything except the overwhelming, all-consuming need to get away. The wind hit me first, a physical blow of cold that stole my breath. The darkness was total. We'd left our flashlights in the tent. The slope was steep, covered in snow, but I ran. We all ran. I caught a glimpse of it as I stumbled through the darkness. Just a silhouette against the slightly lighter sky. Towering. 8 feet tall, maybe 9. Massive shoulders. Arms that hung too low. And eyes. Reflective eyes that caught what little light existed and threw it back like mirrors. Not human. Not bear. Something else. Something that shouldn't exist, but did. It roared again, and the sound was a physical thing that pushed me forward, made my legs pump faster even though I was already running as fast as I could in the deep snow. We ran down the slope. Some of us were trying to stick together, others scattered in pure panic. I could hear screaming, high, terrible screaming that I couldn't tell if it was coming from my friends or my own throat. The cold was already working on us. I was in my undershirt and pants. No coat, no hat, no gloves. In minus 30-degree weather. Every breath was knives in my lungs. My feet were already going numb. But the alternative, stopping, going back, that wasn't an option. Because whatever those things were, they were following us. I could hear them crashing through the snow behind us, hear their breathing, their grunts, their roars. We ran for the tree line, a kilometer down the slope, maybe more. It felt like miles. It felt like forever. Those of us who made it to the trees, and not all of us did, callosities in the snow, gasping, crying, shivering, shaking from cold and terror. Georgy and Yuri Doroshenko immediately started trying to build fire. Their fingers were already blue, movements clumsy, but they worked with desperate determination. We needed fire. Without fire, we would die. I helped them, though my hands wouldn't work properly. We gathered dead branches, dry needles. Georgy had a lighter. Thank God he'd had it in his pocket. It took dozens of tries, but finally a spark caught, a tiny flame. We fed it carefully, desperately. The fire grew, not much, but enough to feel its heat on our frozen faces. Where are the others? Zeno was turning in circles, trying to see through the darkness and trees. Where's Igor? Where's Ludmila? We'd been scattered in the run. Some had gone different directions. Some had fallen, and we hadn't stopped to help them. Because stopping meant dying, meant being caught by those things.
And they were still out there. I could hear them moving through the forest, breaking branches. That breathing, that terrible mechanical breathing. We need to go back. Igor's voice came from the darkness, and I nearly cried with relief. He'd made it. Our leader had made it. We need to get to the tent, get supplies. We'll die out here without them. Are you insane? Rustem's voice was shaking. Those things will kill us anyway if we freeze to death. Igor interrupted. I'm going back. Who's with me? It was madness, but he was right. Without coats, without proper shelter, we had maybe hours before hypothermia took us all. I volunteered. So did Zena and Rustem. The four of us left the fire, started back up the slope toward where we'd left the tent. The others stayed, feeding the fire, trying to survive. We didn't make it far. They were waiting for us. I think they had been playing with us before, hurting us. But now, in the forest, the hunt began in earnest. The first sign was a tree exploding. Not falling, exploding. Splinters of wood flying in all directions as something massive slammed into it. We scattered. Again. 4 different directions. I ran blindly through the darkness, branches whipping my face, snow grabbing at my legs. Behind me, I could hear one of them following. Not running. They didn't need to run. They were so much bigger than us. Each of their steps covered ground that took us 3 or 4 strides to match. I could hear its breathing, getting closer. I risked a glance back. It was there, maybe 20 feet behind me. Massive, covered in hair that was white or light brown. Hard to tell in the darkness. Its face was almost human, but wrong. The proportions were off. The jaw too wide, the eyes too far apart. And those eyes, intelligent. Not the blank stare of an animal. These eyes were thinking, calculating, hunting. I turned back forward just in time to see the ravine. Too late to stop. I went over the edge, tumbling, falling, hitting rocks and snow. I must have fallen 30 feet before I crashed into the frozen stream bed below. Pain exploded through my body. My left arm was bent at a wrong angle. My ribs screamed with every breath, but I was alive. Above me, silhouetted against the slightly lighter sky, I could see it looking down at me. For a long moment, we stared at each other, predator and prey. Then it moved away, losing interest or perhaps going after easier targets. I lay there in the frozen stream bed, unable to move, watching the sky, waiting to die. I don't remember how long I lay there. Hours, certainly. I drifted in and out of consciousness. The cold had stopped hurting. That's a bad sign. It means your body is shutting down, conserving heat for vital organs, letting the extremities die first. I thought about my mother, about the girl I'd been courting back in Sverdlovsk, about all the things I'd never do, never see, never experience. But I didn't die. When dawn came, gray, weak, but dawn nonetheless, I somehow found the strength to move. My left arm was useless, probably broken. My feet were black with frostbite, but I could move. I crawled out of that ravine. It took everything I had, but I made it. The forest was silent now. The things, whatever they were, had gone. Back up the mountain, perhaps. Back to whatever hell had birthed them. I found the tent first, or what was left of it.
slashed to pieces, destroyed, our supplies scattered in the snow. I grabbed what I could, a coat, boots that didn't fit, some food. Every movement was agony. Then I started finding the bodies. Igor and Zina, frozen on the slope. They'd made it maybe a third of the way back to the tent before the cold took them. They were positioned as if they'd been crawling, still trying to reach safety, even as their bodies shut down. Rustem, further up. His skull was fractured. He'd fallen, or been struck. Back at the tree line, I found Georgie and Yuri. They'd died by the fire they'd built. The fire had gone out, and so had they. Their bodies showed signs of something else, though. Strange injuries. Georgie's leg was burned, as if he'd let it rest in the fire and hadn't felt it. Post-mortem? Or had the cold numbed him so much he hadn't noticed?
It took me 4 days to reach civilization. 4 days of stumbling through snow, delirious with pain and fever, my frost-bitten feet leaving bloody prints in the snow. I ate bark, I ate snow. Twice I collapsed and was sure I'd never get up again. But I did. Some stubborn part of me refused to die, refused to let those things win. When I finally reached a Mansi settlement, I collapsed in the snow in front of the first hut I saw. An old man, maybe the same one who'd warned us, dragged me inside, laid me by his fire, gave me broth and vodka, and shook his head sadly. "Kholat Syakhl," he said simply. The mountain took them. The Soviet authorities arrived 2 days later. I was in and out of consciousness, raving about creatures and roars and terror in the snow. They listened to my story with stone faces. Then came the men in suits. KGB, though they never said it explicitly. They told me what would happen next. I would never speak of this. The story would be that I'd gotten separated from the group early in the trek, had to turn back due to injury, never made it to the final camp. The official record would show 9 members, not 10. If I agreed, I would receive medical care, a pension, a quiet job in a quiet city far from the Urals. If I didn't agree, well, they didn't need to elaborate on that threat. What choice did I have? My friends were dead, my feet were destroyed, I would lose 7 toes to frostbite. My arm would never work properly again. And who would believe me? Giant creatures in the Urals? It sounded like madness, even to my own ears. So I agreed. I became a ghost, a person who was never there. The official investigation concluded it was a compelling natural force that killed my friends. They noted the strange injuries, the radiation found on some of the clothing, the way the tent had been cut from the inside, the fact that experienced mountaineers had fled into deadly cold wearing almost nothing. But they never said what that force was, never explained it, just closed the case and classified the files. I'm an old man now. 65 years have passed since that night on Kholat Syakhl. I've lived a quiet life, as promised. Married a good woman who never asked too many questions about my nightmares. Had children who don't know their father's real history. But I remember. Every night I remember. The Soviet Union fell. Russia rose from its ashes. The Dyatlov Pass Incident became famous, a mystery that spawned 1,000 theories. Avalanches, military tests, infrasound, UFOs, secret weapons, paradoxical undressing from hypothermia. Everyone has a theory. No one has the truth. Except me. And the Mansi, who have always known. The mountains are old. Older than humans, older than civilization. And they are not empty. Things live there. Ancient things. Surviving in places too remote, too harsh for humanity to settle. Things that humanity has forgotten, or convinced itself never existed. The Almasty, the Mansi call them. The wild men of the mountains. Most people call them Yeti. But names don't matter. What matters is that they're real. I saw them. I survived them. Why did they attack us? I don't know. Maybe we got too close to their territory.
Maybe they saw us as threats or prey. Maybe they're just as hostile and territorial as any animal protecting its domain. I've spent 65 years wondering if I could have done something different, if I could have saved my friends. But I know the answer. No. Once we set foot on that mountain, our fate was sealed. The moment we ignored the warnings, dismissed the local knowledge as superstition, we were dead. We just didn't know it yet. The files remain classified in Russia. Some documents have leaked over the years, fueling the mystery. But the real truth, the 10th witness, the creatures, the hunt in the darkness, that remains buried. I'm telling this story now because I'm dying. Cancer, the doctors say. 6 months, maybe a year. And before I go, I need someone to know the truth. Not theories, not speculation. The truth.
My friends didn't die from an avalanche, or military tests, or any rational explanation. They died running in terror from something that shouldn't exist, but does. They died because humans, in our arrogance, have forgotten that we are not the top of the food chain in all places. That there are still wild spaces where we are not masters, but intruders. Kholat Syakhl means dead mountain in the Mansi language. It was named that long before we arrived, long before that terrible night in 1959. The Mansi knew. They tried to warn us. We should have listened. If you ever find yourself planning a trek through remote mountains, the Urals, the Himalayas, the Pacific Northwest, anywhere wild and isolated, and the locals tell you not to go, that the mountain is dangerous, that there are things there, listen to them. Because some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some mountains are better left unclimbed. And some truths are too terrible for the world to accept. I am Mikhail Petrov, the 10th member of the Dyatlov expedition. The one who survived. The one who knows. And soon, I'll take my secrets to the grave, where they belong, where perhaps they should have stayed all along. But not before I warn you. The mountains remember, and they are not empty. Never think you're alone in the wilderness.